Hey everyone, welcome to Sideline Shenanigans. My name is Brian Jones, your host. I have Coach Kinzie here from Frankfort High School. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. It's
Good,
always
good,
always a
good.
great thing to talk about some hot dog football.
Oh yeah. Back in the day, they were really, really good. Nowadays, it's like high school football has really changed since I've played and since you've played, really. All right, Coach. My first question of the day is: what got you into coaching?
Yeah, so it's a fun story. So I was a hockey guy. Never really got involved in anything. When I was in college, I was in college to do broadcasting. I wanted to be either a weatherman or play one on TV. So I
Right.
was at Ball State doing broadcasting, and then I came back up to IUSB in South Bend to do broadcasting. And my brother had been coaching football for a couple of years. In the season of 2001, he was an assistant coach in 2000 at South Bend LaSalle. They
Mhm.
announced that they were going to close LaSalle High School, so 2001 was the last year. Basically, like all the kids left. It was just seniors and juniors. There were maybe 3 coaches on staff, and he kind of hit me up and is like, "Hey, man, like we need help. Come help us out." So
Mhm.
I did, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Changed my major to education, and I haven't looked back since.
Okay. I like it. I love it. I love it. What's your core coaching philosophy?
Yeah, I really believe my core coaching philosophy. I always talk about it being like the power of my culture. POWRR. The P is the people. You've got to have it. It's got to be about the people first and foremost. It can't be about wins and losses. There's 320 high schools in the state of Indiana, and if the goal is to win a state championship, then that
Mm.
means 314 of them are failures, right? That can't be the goal. I think focusing on the people, focusing on the love, focusing on the brotherhood, that definitely is something that then will lead to a culture that allows for success to be there. The O is for ownership. You've got to make sure everybody has some sense of ownership. I'm not the coach
Mhm.
that says, here's what we run, here's or do it because I said so. I explain why we have certain play calls in certain situations, why
Mhm.
we run a certain formation, why we run a certain thing. I want everybody to feel like they're a part of it. Even the kids that aren't on the football team, we have them helping us with our fundraiser right now. I want to make sure that the janitors, the custodial staff, I want everybody at Frankfort to feel like they have a part in this program, even if they don't play, because I want the stands full of people that, don't have kids that are on the field at that time. So that's a big one. And then the W is for work. And that's, again, I got to have a bunch of guys that are willing to grab a shovel and get digging.
Right, right, right.
If you're not willing to do the work, you're not going to make it very far. And then the R is results and response. That's, you've got to measure everything. If you like, I'm a big believer. By the time we get to week 3, week 4 of the season, most of the
Mm,
drills we run are just like, okay, what did we stink at? What can we
mm.
do to fix what we stink at? And you have to measure it so that you're heading towards a goal. You can't just be blind feeling your way through. You got to have some kind of a vision, and some kind of a plan.
Okay. How do you scout opponents without a large staff?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think that I love Huddle Sideline. There's a lot of coaches that utilize Huddle Sideline, where they
Mhm.
send in their Huddle film and Huddle breaks it down for you. It'll be a cold day in hell before I allow that to happen in my program. We might have 5 guys, 6 guys on staff. There's one guy that has to go through, and his job is to just put down, the 1st and 10, put in the yard lines. That's it. Another person comes in, put in the hash, put in the direction of the play. The next person comes in, put in the personnel groupings. I want to make sure that every single person on my staff, from a volunteer to a paid position, the volunteers might be the ones that put in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3. But
Mhm.
I want to make sure that, we have, if I have a staff of 25 or 30, I can be a little bit more, pigeonholed, and I can have more specialized roles. When you have a staff of 5 or 6 guys, you got to make sure every single person sees that film, touches that film, interacts with
Mhm.
that film, just because you never know, the most random, that guy that's the volunteer JV defensive line coach might see something on film that the rest of us didn't see. We're all
Right.
coaches. We all know the game. So I think that you have to make sure that you have a bunch of guys that are bought in, and own that. And I know I've struggled. I think that, especially in, like, I'm a worker, I'm a guy, man. I put in 16-hour, 18-hour days with a smile on my face. And I feel
Mm.
like our culture is not like that. Everybody's looking for shortcuts. And you just got to make sure, that if you're one of those people, you won't last very long on a Coach Kinzie staff. I got to
Mhm.
find like-minded people.
Okay. How do you adjust your defense when facing a dual threat quarterback?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think the RPO has completely changed the game of football, and I think that from a defensive mindset, I think you have to identify what's being read, and you can manipulate those reads. In the case of so let's just say you're running against an 11P inside zone outside zone team, which I
Mhm.
feel like 90% of the teams you see in America are. They run that little H-back sniffer, and it's all just zone read, outside zone, left and right. You have to make the decision, when you have that backside defensive end, he's being read. So you're going to tell that backside defensive end, okay, if the quarterback is the threat, then we're going to have you surf real slow, force that guy to hand off the ball because I've got a bunch of help on the front side of the play. If that quarterback isn't quite as much of an explosive threat, if that running back is the dude, you're going to tell that defensive end, all right, you're going to crash like crazy. We'll let the quarterback pull it, and we're going to trust my safety to step up. That backside force counter cutback player is going to be able to get that. I think you just have to you have to scout personnel. You have to know who you're playing
Mhm.
against. You got to know the strengths of the opposing offense, and I'm a big believer in the mentality. That every team has 2, 3, 4 things that they're going to hang their hat on. We want to take those things away. You might beat us, but you're going to beat us with something pretty deep in the playbook.
Absolutely. How do you encourage multi-sport athletes?
Yeah, I mean, we love it. I know for me, I think there was a period of time, even coming from Mishawaka Marion, at Mishawaka Marion, we joked around and said, we're a Catholic school, big families, 8, 9 kids. We might as well have put names on the back of the jersey because we always had these huge families. But it was like the guys that were the studs on the football team were also the studs on the basketball team. We're also the studs on the baseball
Right.
team. Even Xander Horvath, who I coached at Marion, he was a linebacker. Everybody knows him as a running back because he went to the NFL to play running back, and I think he's in the
Mhm.
Canadian Football League now. He was recruited by a couple of schools to play linebacker. He ran track. I mean, like he was a multi-sport guy. I think that you have to work with your other sport coaches, and obviously, I don't run Lincoln Riley's playbook. I'm not air raid
Right.
certified. If I had a playbook that was that thick, it would be really hard for me to teach it to a team full of multi-sport athletes.
Right.
Um, I would rather have a thinner playbook run. I mean, essentially what a high school playbook is supposed to be. But I want my guys out competing with Frankfort on their chest. I want to get athletes, and I'll find a way to use them on a football field. I don't need a team of football players. I need a team of athletes, guys that want to compete, guys that want to represent their school. Plus, it also helps multi-sport athletes, man. Like when you have a kid playing 3 sports all year round, it's really easy to keep track of their grades. You know what I mean? It's better than when you have somebody that just specializes. It's too easy for those kids to fall through the cracks and get behind on grades. And
Mhm.
next thing you've wasted 3 months working with a kid that's got 3 Fs, and you're scrambling to try to even get them eligible for the year. I think multi-sport athletes that's the move nowadays. And people try to push kids to specialize. There's certain sports and certain organizations that push towards specialization. I think across the state, I don't think football is one of them. I think to a man, every one of the 320 IHSAA head coaches is probably saying the exact same thing. Go compete, go wrestle, go run track. We want you.
Right. 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 How do you balance being a coach and a mentor?
Yeah, so I think again, as a head coach, a lot of times, you're the CEO of the operation. I always give the advice. I've had some young coaches that their goal is like, I want to be a head coach. I want to be a head coach. Like, all right, why do you want to be a head coach? Because if you love the X's and O's, like I did a heck of a lot more X and Oing when I was a coordinator or a position coach. As a head coach, you're managing a lot of things. But I always love, we have a couple of guys that are on our staff this year that are new to coaching, or some of them it's their first year coaching. But I've
Mhm.
always loved bringing on guys that, maybe again, I think that the day of the lifelong, assistant coach, the sort of master sergeant, the gray haired guy that's been doing it for 50 years, I think that
Mhm.
those days are long gone. I think you have to find a way to get that 21, 22-year-old guy, get him coaching for 2 or 3 years. Maybe he falls in love with it. Maybe he gets married and then ends up going off and doing something that actually earns a paycheck. but I think that you have to have some kind of a mentoring program in place. And a lot of that is just, again, it goes back to the culture. It's the ownership. I'm going to take a kid that, a 21-year-old fresh out of college kid with no experience, and I'm going to put him in charge of something. Like, you will be in charge of something. You will be the head coach of this thing, whether it's, pre-game warmups. You're the head coach of the pre-game warmups, and I'll meet with him regularly and talk about, all right, what went well? What do you think we need to change? You got to be okay with giving somebody a position that they might fail at, and it's my job to come in and back them up. But that's part of the business. This is not a sport that you can do it all yourself. I've been in that situation before, and it's not gone well. So you've got to be willing to trust those guys, but you have to give them constant feedback, the constructive criticism. But you have to have a person that is, if they get defensive about criticism, it ain't going to work. You've got to be somebody that, comes in and says, hey, coach, what could I do different? What could I do better? If you have that mentality, you're going to go far in life, not just in coaching. So got to make sure you got those right people.
How do you earn the trust of your team?
I think number one, and this is something I say to all the young coaches too, I think that we live in a world that a lot of young teachers and a lot of young coaches struggle with boundaries. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media. Again, you don't want to touch on any inappropriate subjects, but there's a lot of teachers that get in trouble because they're Snapchatting and Instagramming kids. It's just, when you blur that boundary that they're your buddies and not your athletes, it creates a really, it creates a situation that can oftentimes go too far. And I think that you really have to make sure that you are authentic. You can't try to be one of the kids. I'm going to be their buddy and I'm going to make them like me, because sure, that might be fun for the kids, but they got plenty of buddies, man. That's an 18-year-old high school senior. He's got plenty of friends. He doesn't need a new buddy. He needs a coach. And I really think that, I think kids can smell a fake a mile away. And I think you've got to make sure you say, first of all, you have to establish a boundary. They know obviously that I'm their coach. I'm not their buddy. But at the same time, they have to know that I'm, busting my butt doing the things that I need to do to get them successful. I know there's the old adage people always say, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, which I think there's an element of that. But at the same time, you have to know a little bit, 10 years from now, these guys aren't going to be sitting around the local watering hole hey, we were 0-10 and we were terrible, but man, coach sure did love us. There's got to be an element that they see okay, hey, this dude, he has a practice plan. He is organized. He's got the playbook online. He's got the videos explaining things. The installs are there. I think just being well-structured, showing that you have a prerequisite knowledge at the minimum, and then making sure that they understand hey, this is coach, this isn't a buddy. I'm not here to be your friend. I hope you like me. It makes it a lot more fun when they like me. But yeah, I think that it's definitely it's a hard dealing as a 44-year-old dude dealing with teenage boys. Sometimes it can be hard to bridge that gap, but I think that it's something that you got to constantly make sure they know that I'm authentic. I know what I'm talking about. And they got to see competency.
Okay. How do you coach up players with raw athleticism but low IQ?
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches see. You might have a kid that's got tremendous athleticism, but just doesn't know the game or doesn't know the position. And I think too, that a lot of that is a result of just our society today. Everybody has their PlayStation 5 and everybody's playing Madden football, and, everybody's watching, the Wolverines and the Boilermakers, sorry, Boilermaker fans, everybody's watching on Saturday and they see what they're doing on Saturday. And then you go to a high school in Indiana and, you got somebody running the single wing or somebody running the wing T, or, a good friend, Austin Colby, just up the road at Western now runs that double wing. And they're Austin Colby only has 3 plays in his playbook. Mm-hmm. Austin Colby's going for 600 yards rushing a game. So those are 3 pretty good plays. I think that, it's tough because you have kids that they don't know the basics. I guess the football IQ is definitely low. But I think that when you're in that situation, again, I think it comes down to, if I'm air raid certified and I'm trying to teach a 16-year-old kid all the things I know, he doesn't need to know all that stuff. He needs to know his job. He needs to know the role. And I think that there's times that, there are coaches that believe in the best 11. You got to have your best 11 athletes on the field at all times. And I think that there's some positive there's some positive stuff to that. It's not a bad idea to be like, hey, these are our best 11 dudes. We need to have these best 11 dudes out there. But then at the same time, you might have a kid that like, okay, this kid's a pretty good athlete. He's fast. He's strong. He has a lot of difficulty counting. He doesn't have a 4.0. He has trouble counting to 4. So maybe I have to say like, okay, is he my best 11? No, but I can put him maybe as that backside defensive end. It's a pretty simple position to coach. He's only got one read. Boom, I'm going to put him out there. And I might be better off with another player at that position, but now I have that sophomore or that junior, and I'm developing him to be better down the road. I know when I was at South Bend Riley, in 2000, we had a very senior heavy team, but it was holy cow. COVID ripped us apart. The rules that we had to follow up in St. Joe County were insane. It's a miracle we made it through the season, let alone made it through 4 and 6. But then the next year we came out and we had, obviously because of COVID, we had lost so many kids. I think we ended up with 5 seniors on the football team, maybe like 6 juniors. We had a massive group of freshmen and sophomores. And we just kind of made the decision where it's like, all right, we're going to have a lot of freshmen and sophomores starting on both sides of the field. The first game, I think we went up against Michigan City, who had 2 or 3 Division I kids. I think the kid went to go be a running back at Syracuse, and I had 9 freshmen and sophomores on the field on defense. It's a miracle I didn't get arrested by DCS on the way off the field afterwards. But you look 2 years later, and Riley had a 9-1 or an 8-2 season. They had one of the best seasons they've had in the last 30 years. It's like, yeah, because those juniors and seniors were starting as freshmen and sophomores. Like, they had time to develop. And there's times that you have to just you got to take a hit. And you're like, listen, we're not going to be that good this year. We're really developing some talent. Hopefully everybody else isn't in that same situation. But I think that, there's always got to be, the 2 or 3 freshmen and sophomores that you're working to develop, so that when that big senior class graduates, you're not wandering the desert and getting fired because you go 1-8 or 1-7 or whatever. I think it was 1-6, whatever the heck I was that year. But
how do you develop linemen in a small school? I know Frankfort's a 4A school, but it's still pretty small. It's a small area.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things I love about the system we run, is we want people that want to be linemen. It's fun to be a lineman in our system. We have kids that are 180 pounds that are like, hey, coach, can I be a lineman? Yes, absolutely. You can be a lineman. Let's go. But I know we do things like when we do our team dinners, linemen eat first. We haven't been through a season, but we'll always have, when we post our highlight reels, the kids are always going to post their highlight reels when they run trap and it pops for 35 yards. I'm going to be posting highlight reels of check out this pancake, check out this down block. I think we hype up the linemen as much as we possibly can, because we want those guys to want to be linemen, especially in this system. We've at Frankfort right now, we have large young men. Size is not going to be our problem this year. But at the same time, I don't need 350-pound linemen. If you look at, just up the road, Warsaw, Bart Curtis is a good buddy of mine. I'm repping the TMT camp t-shirt. So Coach Curtis is a really good friend of mine. And, he is out there with offensive linemen that are 215, 220, right? And he's going up against Concord and Lafayette Jeff, those offensive line are trucks. I mean, they're running triple option against a semi and an F-250, right?
Right.
So I think we run a system that we can get by with getting some of those younger guys and playing linemen. Plus, we can take a kid in a 56 and play him at fullback. He just can't run a route for us, and that's fine. Our fullbacks don't run routes anyways. So I think it's, we want to try to reward the linemen and make people want to be linemen. That solves our problem for sure.
Okay, Coach. What's your favorite drill to run? Your favorite thing, drill to run in practice?
Okay, so I know that it is the move in football today. I think, Dartmouth College has the whole Dartmouth tackling. And I know that there's a lot of teams that, they don't hit each other in practice during the season. They just hit bags. And we do a lot of that. We try to keep ourselves fresh. We don't want to get, I don't need to get my starting running back hurt on a Wednesday because a sophomore, linebacker tackled him wrong. But I do love, we run the midnight alley. I've seen a couple of schools do it where you get three defenders on their belly. You get an offensive lineman, a lead blocker, and a running back. And I just think there's nothing better than you open practice. We do our team stretch. We line up and do midnight alley, and we just send the message like, we're in full pads, boys. It's a reminder. We're going to wake you up. If you're not paying attention, you will be paying attention in about 5 minutes when you're getting rocked. Love midnight alley. Besides that, we are as a flexbone triple option team, we copy a lot of stuff that Harding does. And I think Harding has, and listen, like if anybody out there, even if you're not a triple option team, Harding, like the things that they do are not triple option related. Like the way that they have revolutionized their practice. Like we don't even have basically position coaches, we'll have like who coaches quarterbacks. Well, it depends. I've got Coach Dooley's over there working with the guys during our pup period. I'm over here working with the guys during our Bama period. They do a lot of pod work where you'll have guard, center guard, quarterback, and a fullback running inside plays in one direction. And then, we have the backup quarterback, and then the tackles, slots, and the ends are working in the pod wing tackle, the tackle wing pod. I think that the way that we structure our pods are really exciting. It's a lot of fun. It forces us as coaches to be super, super organized. And the kids like it because our practices are 90 minutes. And it's like, when they see that 90-minute practice, it's like, ooh, it's 90-minute practice. Like, yeah, but have you seen a soccer game? It's 90 minutes of nonstop running. There's no standing around. You are going to be good and tired at the end of those 90 minutes, man.
Yeah. Back when I was in high school, I played for Attica.
Okay.
We would have like almost 2-hour practices. I graduated in 2022. I know it's not that long ago, but like our coaches were really like, hey, let's do this. We would go to practice like 3:30, get out 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:15. I wouldn't get home till 7. I was still dog tired.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, especially like, I don't have Marion, like, Reggie Glon, kind of my mentor that I coached with at Marion for years and years. Reggie Glon's a Hall of Fame guy. We had a true 2-platoon system. We had all the defense on, one side, all the offense on one side. We didn't have very many kids that went both ways. We still practiced for 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I do think, even there where we had a lot of success, you can kind of look around practice and see, after about, an hour and 50 minutes, like, okay, these guys have all tuned out. Practice has kind of jumped the shark. We're kind of horsing around at this point. So, and it kind of makes it nice too, because that way, with a shorter, more focused practice, I think that, you can attract more athletes because, like you said, nobody wants to be home at 7 p.m. on a school night. It makes it nice for the guys. We now have our advanced weight class. We have a strength and conditioning coach. So our football players lift during the day in the fall semester. So like when we're done with practice, we don't even have to lift. Our lifts are done. Get the heck out of here, man. You will have kids home by 5 o'clock.
What's your approach to player mental health?
I think it's a big thing in today's day and age. And again, I think, mentioning social media, I think that, the world is so different from, obviously, you and I are two totally different generations. But, like if I was at school, like when I was in, little first grade, second grade, Justin Kinzie, I had a big old afro. Like I had a big white boy afro. It was great. Larry Bird was my hero. But so like at one point, I remember kids started making fun of me because I had like the big white boy fro, and I wore like green sweatbands because, again, Larry Bird is my hero, right? And I remember being like a first grader, and like the kids in the class were making fun of me or bullying me. But then at the end of the day, I went home and I played with my Legos and I played video games, and I didn't have to hear it again until the next day, right? Like there was the ability to unplug and just be a kid. And I think that our kids these days, they don't have that. And I know, we've had a lot of situations. I know at Riley, we had a horrible situation where we had a kid, Curtis, God bless him, rest in peace. He transferred back to Riley from Tennessee. He wasn't eligible to play. And so, he was working his butt off. He was at every single practice. And then one day we went to a game. He wasn't eligible to play. So I just decided, I'm just going to go run around the neighborhood with my cousin and our friends. He ended up getting shot and killed. If he would have been with us, he would still be alive today. Who knows? He would have been a heck of a football player too. He was a really, really nice young man. And I think it's just a reminder that, that there are a lot of kids in society that, they're dealing with a lot of stuff that we, us old guys don't know about. And so I think, more so than anything else today, these kids have to know, you're in it because you love the kids. You'll see us whenever I tweet anything or X anything. I don't even know what is the verb that is attached to X now? Because it used to be Twitter and tweet, whatever. When I post on X, you'll see me put hashtag LYB. That's love your brother. And you'll see, like, I'll say all the time to the kids, hey, love you boys, love you brother. I think that they have to know, just as a constant reminder. I know it's pretty corny right now. They got this old guy saying, love you brother. Yeah, whatever. But by the time these kids are, walking out, graduating, love you too, coach, all right, I got them. They have to know that, at the end of the day, I'm here for them. It's definitely not the paycheck. So as long as they know, like, listen, man, I'm doing this. I'm spending time away from my kids. I'm spending time away from my home. I'm here because I love you guys. This isn't about the ego. I'm not doing this because I'm getting FaceTime on ESPN. I'm here because I truly love you guys. And knowing that they have that connection with you so they can talk to you about things. And sometimes just, they got to know that football, man, it's fun. Like, this is whatever else they're dealing with at home. Like, for the 90 minutes you're here, that stuff doesn't matter. You get 2 hours of just focus on football. Friday nights, man, there's a lot of people that deal with a lot of BS just because they're trying to survive till Friday night. And I want to make sure that we're giving them that environment.
How do you keep your younger players patient as they develop?
Yeah, and I think I'm really nervous about the IHSA transfer rule, because I think that you're going to see a lot of kids, maybe not even necessarily just in football, but you might have a kid that, I know, like, I'll use baseball as an example. Frankfort has a pretty good baseball program, so I don't think we're somebody that's going to really impact. But you have a lot of kids that are baseball players that their families are paying thousands of dollars for travel leagues, right? You got kids that, when you see a kid playing high school baseball, like, you think, how much money went into that swing, developing that swing, how many hitting coaches, how many hours in the batting cage. And so you have a parent that has now spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for their kid to compete in this elite silver championship, whatever. They've got rings and medals. And now all of a sudden the kid is a backup JV baseball player. It's going to be really easy for that kid to say, I'm going down the street to so-and-so where I can start. And I think that that's definitely going to be an issue that I think a lot of people see. Maybe not so much in football, because I think that, in football, there are still a few kids that don't get it. But I think the majority of 14-year-old kids walk on a football field and they see, the 18-year-old defensive tackle that has a full beard and drove himself to football practice. And they realize, maybe I'm not quite ready for varsity yet. But I think that you have to, going back to the results response part of the culture, I think that you have to, in the weight room, you have to record, rank, publish. You have to, record. We do flying tens. We're a big feed the cat school. You have to record, rank, publish your speeds. I think that if you can take that 14-year-old incoming freshman and show them, dude, you've gone up 25 pounds in your clean just since you showed up in July, that's enough to keep that kid hungry and motivated. I think that there's still, sadly, there's enough programs out there that, when they do their lift, kids aren't even writing down their weights. They're just in there doing it to do it. It's just like a time killer. And I think that that's something that you always risk losing young men, young athletes. I think that you have to show them visibly, like, dude, you showed up at a 15 mile per hour flying 10. Now you're at a 15.8. Like, imagine where you're going to be next year. You have to show them, you might not be on the field, but you can show them tangible, quantifiable evidence. Like, look at how you're developing, dude, stay motivated and stay after it.
Do you have a game day snack or meal that you eat?
So Frankfort, apparently, like, prior to me coming here, we always did a game day meal, which is fantastic. Like, listen, I love it. Our community, like, I don't know how much you know about Frankfort, but there are some fantastic local restaurants in Frankfort. Like, I'll give a shout out, La Mixteca. Ooh, man, if you need some birria tacos, La Mixteca in Frankfort is fantastic. I don't know that the kids eating La Mixteca tacos on a Friday at 4 p.m. is in our best interest, if you catch my drift. Yeah, there'll be kids running to the bathroom like, Coach, I'm gonna have an accident. So okay, we're doing away with the game day meals. We're gonna go to the pregame meal. So Thursday night, we're gonna go back to having a meal on Thursday night, have an alumni come in and talk to the guys, and then on Friday. I'm a big believer, hopefully I can get the parents and get some of the parents involved. Like, dude, there's nothing better than a banana, a granola bar, and a Uncrustable. I think I saw on X, somebody tweeted the statistic of the number of Uncrustables consumed by the different NFL teams through a football season.
A
And it was
lot.
insane. It's like, listen, you guys don't understand. I know that there's peanut butter allergies and everything, but if you are a team that does not have any peanut butter allergies, like there's nothing better than an Uncrustable, dude. Holy cow. An Uncrustable, a banana, an orange, and a granola bar in a brown paper bag when you're on the way to a game. Ooh, that's exactly where you need to be.
What's your biggest pet peeve as a coach?
So I think my biggest pet peeve as a coach is, so I know growing up, my first maybe like 8 seasons coaching, I was a super part-time guy before Huddle really existed. My job was what Huddle did. I had an Excel spreadsheet open. I had the VHS or the CD, and I broke down and did my little Excel spreadsheet of all the different formations and stuff. If I would have, monetized that and got in on it before Huddle did, it would have been a much different future for Coach Kinzie, but it is what it is. But I was only on the field practicing. I'd be there Monday to turn in my scouting report. Then I wouldn't be back on the field until Thursday. I'd be there for Friday nights. Sometimes I would do Saturday. So I was like a part-time guy. And so my first year as a full-time coach, I remember telling people like, oh, this is my first year coaching. This is my second year coaching. But then, you realize that there's a lot of guys out there that, the young first year coach that walks on the field and they're like, I should be running this whole thing, shouldn't I? And, it's like, guys, you got to pay your dues. Like, I was an unpaid coach. I did laundry. I was washing kids' girdles. You got to earn your keep, man. You got to put your time in. And I think that sometimes that frustrates me when you get like a lot of young coaches. I love that you're motivated. I love that you're excited. That's awesome. I agree. This is a cool play that you saw, Dan Casey, Coach Casey post on Instagram. That's a really cool play. We can't run it. Thanks for your input though. That's a pet peeve. I think sometimes as you get those young coaches that you don't know what you know. But I forget how to word it. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. And there's the curve where it's like, you're at the beginning of your career and you're like, your actual knowledge is down here, but you think you know this. And then 3 or 4 years in, you're like hopeless. Like, I'll never learn this. I should quit. So that can be definitely one of the pet peeves is you get those young guys that don't know sometimes.
What's the funniest moment you've had on the sidelines?
Okay, so man, I've had some experiences. I think one of my funniest, I was coaching at South Bend Riley. We were playing a game at Bremen, and God bless us, same situation. We had the super young football team. And so it was a punt. I'm going to get the situation mixed up. It was like a 4th and 2, and we were going to go for it. But then the referees respotted the ball, and it turned into like a 4th and 6. And it's like, holy cow. Okay, 4th and 6 on our side of the 50. Like, no, so we're trying to rush our punt team out. And my special teams coordinator, God bless him, great kid. He was kind of in that, beginning of his career. And we ended up like rushing. We had to have had like 18 kids on the football field. And so I started grabbing kids and we ended up having like 10 extra kids on the sideline that we were pushing on the field. We ended up with like 35 kids on the field. And I go to the sideline judge. I'm like, I'm sorry, there's bees. The guys are freaking out because there's a bunch of bees flying around the bench on the sideline. So the referees they reset the clock and everything. It's like, yes, that's one way to cheat out a timeout. But yeah, so that was pretty funny. My uncle was my offensive coordinator in 2000, and we were playing against Gary Westside, who's, phenomenal football team, really, really tough team. That guy is now the head coach at Hobart. So obviously he's doing okay for himself. We had a great stop to end the second half, or to end the second quarter. We're going into halftime. There's 10 seconds left. We get a goal line stand. We're on the 2-yard line, and I turned to him. He's my OC. And I was like, hey, just take a knee. Let's go to halftime. Like, you're taking a shot, aren't you? And he just didn't respond to me. Sure enough, took a shot, almost intercepted it. It's like, yeah. Okay. We took a knee on the next play. So that's Riley. I'm not even including any of my Marion stories, my Brandywine stories. I could write a book, man. It's been career. There's nothing like it, man. I tell you what. It is kind of cool because I know like the average human being, like when you're on your deathbed and you're dying, like you're thinking of memories with your family and with your wife and with your kids. Like, man, I'm going to be on my deathbed and I'm going to be remembering all that. Like, I can't believe so-and-so did that on that fourth down. I can't believe so-and-so did that. Like, I'm going to have some good memories on my deathbed.
How do you celebrate after a big win?
So that's something I struggle with. I definitely like I fall into the category of as soon as the game's over, like, listen, I'm walking off the field and I'm already like, all right, so next week we have so and so. What are we going to do? We got to stop this kid. Getting on Twitter. Okay, how'd they do? How did everybody else do? I know Bart Curtis's son, coaches with him, and he gives his dad a hard time. It's like it's okay to celebrate every once in a while. I definitely fit into that category. So I'll tell the kids all the time, like, hey, man, there's nothing on earth. Like, there's certain things in sports that are hard to do, like hitting a fastball isn't it physically impossible? If you explain the math between like the reaction times, it should be physically impossible to hit a fastball. So, I mean, that's tough. Yeah. But winning a football game is hard, man. Like it is a very, very difficult thing to get 11 pieces moving at the same time when your opponent is also doing the same things. I definitely want the guys to enjoy it. I want the assistant coaches to enjoy it. I'm gonna be driving home stressing. So I don't. How do I celebrate? Anxiety. I don't know what to tell you. I let everybody else celebrate it. I have too much anxiety to do that.
What's your favorite like football movie quote?
Wow. So I do love. I got a lot of good. I'm a big movie and movie quote guy. I do love from We Are Marshall. I love the clip when they're sitting in the coaching office, like, all right, power eye, boom, in the trash. What is the simplest thing you have ever run and won a football game? And I love it because Coach Red Dawson, veer, we could run the veer. Like, ooh, talk to me about the veer. And then they go to Bobby Bowden at West Virginia and they copy the veer from West Virginia. And I love on the field, Coach Red Dawson looks a little something like the veer, doesn't it? I just love that, man. We Are Marshall is a great football movie.
It is. It really is one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
I personally, my favorite is Rudy. I love Rudy.
Yep.
I know, like Joe Montana said, that's kind of BS, but I don't care. Rudy is such a good movie.
5 foot nothing, 100 and nothing. Yeah. I work in Frankfort, but I live still in South Bend. I'm right on Twickenham. If I turn north and drive 10 minutes, I'm at Notre Dame's campus. Rudy is a big one. I think it was when we were playing against Michigan a couple of years ago, the official game shirts, Michigan had t-shirts that said Rudy was offsides. I was like, listen, that's like making fun of the Pope. Like, we don't do that. Like, don't make fun of Rudy. Rudy was not offsides. He was 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing in the heart of a lion.
What's your favorite drill? No, I'm not. Well, other than the one you told me about earlier, what's your favorite drill of all time?
So I'll tell you, my favorite drill of all time. I love. I recently, probably about 10 years ago, started to get into strength and conditioning a lot more than just the coaching side of things. And I tell you, like, I could sit and talk football for 2 hours. I could sit and talk strength and conditioning for 10. Right. So I kind of like accidentally stumbled into Tony Holler and the Feed the Cat stuff. And I think like the flying tens, like I'm telling you, man, there's like anybody out there that is not Record Rank Publishing flying tens. Again, just think about it. The majority of injuries you're going to see on a football field, it isn't the concussions and the broken arms. It's, knees, ankles, hamstrings, and, forcing a 300-pound lineman to get out there and sprint, max effort sprint, is going to get their body ready for football. I tell my kids when we do it, it's just like, listen, there's such a thing as old man strength, right? Your old man, your dad can carry a washing machine from the truck to the basement by themselves. Like, if you get into a squat match with your dad will beat you, right? But if you ask your dad to race you to the end of the driveway, his hamstrings will pop, his knees will give out, his ankles will give out. Like, that's, like, strength is nice, but you have to have, explosiveness. You have to be able to sprint. So I love the flying tens. Another big one that we do, and it's a Feed the Cats thing, is we're the whole no conditioning football. So we don't do 300s. We do a thing called tribe testing, where instead of running a 300, we'll line up on the goal line and we set up cones, and you sprint to the 20, touch the 20, and sprint back, and you have 5 seconds to do it. And we have coaches that watch, and the goal is basically in that 5 seconds, you're trying to get to 30 yards. Obviously, the skilled players will, the linemen don't. And then at the end, you do 10 of those, and you keep track of how many yards they got. And so now, when you do a 300, most wide receivers and running backs are jogging the first 250, and then they sprint the last two, so they finish near the top, so it looks good. But, for 250 yards of it, they're just jogging. So the tribe test is a really good way to get everybody sprinting, everybody's max effort. I love tribe. So tribe testing and flying tens are probably my two favorite non-football related drills. But we do that stuff all off season and all season long.
Okay. If you could coach any NFL team, what would it be? Who would it be?
So I got to tell you, I was asked this question. I was interviewed by the Frankfort Broadcasting, the Hotdog Network, and I responded the Colts. And I got to tell you, now that my boy Riley Leonard is there, I got to say Colts, man. I like Riley Leonard he's gonna mess some people up, man. I think he's the kid's a dog. I think he's give him some time. He'll work his way in the lineup. But yeah, he's a great kid. But I think coaching the Colts would be a lot of fun.
Okay, if you could have a meal with any coach, past or present, who would you have dinner with?
Oh man, it's a really good one. I think if I could sit down and have a meal with anyone, I think Lou Holtz would be very, very high on the list, and I would just shut up and listen, man. I'd be like, Lou, just talk, buddy. I got my notepad. I'm ready to go. I think Harbaugh would be a blast. I think he'd be a lot of fun to talk to. I don't know how much of it would be football related. But I think that probably the number one, if I could sit down and have a conversation with anybody, be Mike Leach, man. How could you not? Anybody who says anything other than Mike Leach, it's the wrong answer. Mike Leach is the right answer. And again, none of it would be football related.
Not even Nick Saban?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Nick Saban's awesome, but I think I got to put Mike Leach up there. Mike Leach would be a really
legend.
He's a legend. Oh my, the pirate, man. Come on now.
Okay. How would you like your players to remember you?
Yeah, hopefully, I think at the end of the day, win or lose, whatever success we have, whatever shortcomings we have, we always have a thing. We haven't done it with our football team this year, but at the very start of a football season, I always have the guys write down their goals. And one of the things I say is, I want you to imagine we are at the end of season banquet, and I want you to write what you want your coaches to say about you at the end of season banquet. And I think when I did that assignment, I was thinking to myself, at some point, the good Lord's going to call me home. And it's probably going to end up being my sons and some football players. One of them is going to have to get up and give a speech about me. And it's what do I want these guys to say about me at my funeral? And I do. I hope that at the end of the day, listen, man, I'm a football coach. I love football. This is all I do. I literally have no hobbies. It's just football 24/7. But man, I hope that when they get up and talk about me, it has nothing to do with football. I really do. I hope it's just he was a good man. He did things the right way. He carried himself with integrity. He forced us to carry ourselves with integrity. I really hope I hope that when they eulogize me, that it doesn't have anything to do with football. I really hope so.
Do you believe in tempo-based offense?
So I do. I love it, which is funny because, again, as a flexbone team, we always say the one statistic we actually care about is time of possession. We had a couple of games last year at Brandywine. We realistically should have been an 0-9 football team. We were so small. We had great kids. We had no football players. They were great athletes, good kids, but we had 19 kids on our sideline. We played against Dowajek. They had 19 seniors on their sideline. But we had one game that they couldn't get us off the field. We put together, I think we had a 16 play drive, a 13 play drive. And so that's the stat we really care about is time of possession. That being said, I think that we have a tempo package that we do use. I don't want to divulge too much information, but it's basically we're going to get into a weird formation and we run 3 plays from it and we explain it. It's like an MMA fighter, right? When you have your moves and when you catch that guy and that guy goes down, it's over. Like there's no technique. You are going to jump on that guy and just start throwing hands. Like, I don't care if you're hitting his face, his kidneys, his ribs. Like when you have somebody down, you jump on him and you pound and pound and pound until the referee stops. But we will definitely, you'll see us if we hit somebody, if we run a rocket play and we get a 40-yard gain, you'll see us. We'll switch into a tempo real quick. And I mean, we're going to do nothing but, wedge and trap and belly, but we do have a tempo package that we will run out whenever we get somebody down.
Okay, Coach, my final question for this afternoon for you is, what's something people misunderstand about being a coach?
I think a lot of people just, they don't understand the time that goes into it. There's so much behind the scenes. And I think, like you hear it as a coach, you hear the parents in the stands, yelling things. And like, I never get mad about it. Cause obviously, like, listen, man, like I go to a football game, like I go to a Notre Dame football game and I'm, yelling too. Like I get it, you get fired up, you get in the game, you get caught up in the emotion. But I really do wish that, more people understood, like it applies, I think it applies to coaches, but I think it really applies to officials too. I wish more people understood, when you're getting on social media, blasting a coach, ripping a coach apart. Like I know that's even, obviously, Frankfort hasn't had a lot of success in recent years. And, and I stepped in and that's one of the first things I said is like, we aren't going to talk bad about the old coaching staff. Not going to do it. Like that's, he was doing like, he was doing the best he could with what he had. We've all been there. I know, Bart Curtis himself, when he was at McConaughey and he was at New Prairie, he did not have good seasons. He was not a really, really strong coach then. He got better as he went. But I do think, the officials, like they're not out there because they want to miss calls. They take classes. They have to get certified every year. They're getting reviewed on a weekly basis by the IHSAA and the Indiana Officials Association. I really do wish that I wish more people had a little bit of grace when they dealt with coaches and understood, when you're yelling at that coach, that wife that, hasn't seen her husband in 2 or 3 days is sitting right there hearing it, those, that the 2 or 3, he might have my kids are teenagers, thankfully, but there's a period of time that, my kids were 7, 8 years old and, my kid's on the sideline being my ball boy and he hears, Coach Kinzie getting ripped up in the stands. Like, man, like don't put those guys through it. Like if you have a problem with the way they're doing things, that's fine. Put your resume in, you could apply for the job too. I don't know. Wish more people had some grace when they dealt with us, but at the same time, I understand, you take the job knowing there's a giant target on your back. But yeah, that's definitely one thing I wish more people understood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because some coaches are very misunderstood, and especially with high school football, like football at any level, the media criticizes college and pro coaches.
Yeah.
Like I joke about Mike Tomlin. I think he's the most mid coach of all times. I get my friends are Steeler fans. I'm like, there's an episode called on Spotify from this podcast. It's called Mike Tomlin, the Master of Mid, and I just shit on Mike Tomlin for an hour, pretty much. And I love
it. Get it, yeah.
I love it. But my name is Brian Jones. He's Coach Justin Kinzie. Thank you for listening.
Hey, I'm excited to give a shout out to 2 charities that I'm a big supporter of. A subject that's really close to me. I hold it near and dear to heart. Is men's mental health. I believe that mental health is something that men do not take seriously. We make up 50% of the population, but 80% of the suicides, men, our demographic, 30 to 50 years old. If you look at the numbers, we commit suicide at a rate darn near double teenagers. So again, for it being such a common thing for a man to die by their own hands, it's something that we as a society just don't talk about, and we as men don't talk about. And so 2 charities that I'm a really big supporter of is Movember. Obviously, everybody knows, people get the mustaches for men's mental health, which is awesome. And then Tackle Depression is another really good one that a lot of coaches have been supporting. Definitely recommend, obviously, yes, donate to those charities, retweet stuff. And most importantly, like guys, we've got to be better. A lot of that's on us. More men have died from being a man and not talking about feelings than have died talking about feelings. That's a provable fact. So we got to do better about reaching out when we need help. Understand that, especially, the coaching fraternity. like, man, they need us. Like those kids, there's a lot of people in our communities that are relying on us. We got to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, that we can give ourselves to them.